Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to the February 13th edition of the OBX Wave Report. Today is Monday, February the 13th. I am Robert Scribble, your wave reporter on all things waves, weather, climate, beach lifestyle, water sports, and surfing. All right, so today we are going to talk about well, in this wave report, we're going to talk mostly about the weather and the wave conditions across the Outer Banks, which right now are ranging from 2 to 5 foot as a nor'easter sweeps on off into the North Atlantic, bringing behind it strong to gale force northwesterly winds over parts of the Outer Banks. And what this means is we have a remnant swell for many beaches coming in from the north and northeast that is starting to get blown out by strong northwest winds. Nonetheless, waves are still rather tall, if choppy in many locations. In some locations, we have the waves beating the trend, but overall, the waves are ranging from 2 to 3, 2 to 4, and 2 to 5 feet in a number of locations. I'm going to get down to the local spots and let you guys know what is happening there. Over the course of the day, we can expect the waves to continue to fall down a bit, although a base swell should remain for many of the beaches into tomorrow. And then by Wednesday, the waves are expected to be a bit smaller. And by Thursday and Friday, we might start to get a larger swell. Looking ahead, the weather conditions are expected to be very mild to warm over the coming week, with temperatures warming up into the 50s and 60s to near 70 in some locations across the Outer Banks. So very warm for February, very pleasant conditions. The waves aren't expected to be too gnarly, but you know what? We've had surprises before, so we might actually see some larger waves than expected. The North Atlantic is expected to be pretty stormy, so if a swell does make it to us, it's going to be pretty fine if it does. We're going to get down into the models and give you a more detailed estimate of what the waves are expected to do in the near offshore environment. So that should give you guys some idea what the surf is going to look like. Now, before we get into the wave report, I did want to note some curiosities that had a semi-local impact. I say curiosity. It's a matter that has been in much controversy in the news. So, for example, we just had a balloon shot down off the coast of South Carolina here. This was a Chinese balloon, a spy balloon, that crossed over the United States, and then the Biden administration dispatched an F-22 with a air-to-air missile designed to take down this thing and shot it down over the waters of the Atlantic Ocean here off South Carolina. And over time, we've been subsequently recovering the debris from this balloon and analyzing it to determine what it was for. And the authorities are noting that, nope, not a weather balloon. But now we have had a number of other objects that have been shot down or spotted over the US and Canada. And I just want to talk about this a little bit. Um, there's been a lot of speculation out there, and so let's just tamp down the speculation. For one, it's highly, highly unlikely that these things are unidentified flying objects from outer space. Most likely, these are spy drones or unmanned vehicles sent either by China or Russia to spy on the United States. And my personal opinion, and this is speculation, but my personal opinion is that given the increased tensions between the US and Russia and China, our administration, our leadership has taken the stance of now confronting a spying regime that has likely been going on for some time. And this is part of sending a signal to authoritarian countries, particularly to Russia and China, that we're not going to put up with aggression from either of those states, Russia in the case of Ukraine and China in the case of Taiwan. And my personal opinion is this is a good thing. I that's but that's my opinion. There's a lot of speculation as to why these UAVs, they're likely UAVs or drones and balloons, spy balloons, are getting confronted now. Um, I think the US has decided, well, China, Russia, you guys have meddled in our internal affairs by promoting authoritarianism and bad actors for too long. You guys are getting too aggressive on the world stage, threatening other countries with invasion. And now it's time for you guys to sit back on your heels. We're not going to take it anymore. We're going to take down your spies um, methods, be it balloons or drones. And we're going to learn from the stuff that we're going to shoot down. And we're going to keep doing this until you guys back off a little bit. And I don't know. I think this is a good thing. This is, of course, my opinion. So please listen to the national security experts and the global geopolitical threat experts. But it is worth talking about, I think, because, well, particularly here in the Outer Banks, we're very flight oriented. We're very freedom oriented, especially like real freedom, real freedom meaning democracy kind of freedom, not authoritarianism that claims to be freedom, you know, like scaring people with guns, that kind of thing. Um, yeah, so, or drones or satellites or, well, in this case, giant balloons that fly over your country or threatening invading countries if you just don't like them or think that they should be yours. So yeah, real freedom. That's an Outer Banks thing. All right, so let's get on with the OBX wave report for today. And oops, yeah, I didn't talk about this satellite picture. So let's talk about the satellite shot. This is a weather satellite shot, not a spy satellite shot, of the lower 48, provided to us by the good folk at NOAA from our democratically elected with a, democracy, small d democracy, like we love democracy around the world kind of thing. So yeah, our government's democracy has provided us with this beautiful satellite shot of the lower 48. And wow, is it so gorgeous today. We see so many areas with sunlight streaming down. The weather is actually pretty mild and not too crazy across the United States. And this is a real blessing given the fact that climate change has amped up extreme weather around the world. So we're getting a bit of a respite here in the United States, which is good because especially as the folks down in Chile could attest to right now as they experience like earth-breaking heat and wildfires. We'll get into that in a special report later on today. But yeah, with the climate dice being loaded, we really, really appreciate the periods of calm. And right now here in the Outer Banks, we're looking at the backside of a nor'easter that's heading on off the coast, sending behind it some strong winds. We're getting strong near gale force northwesterly winds and gale force in some locations northwesterly winds. We still have a pretty large swell here in the Outer Banks that I mentioned before in the range of 2 to 5 feet, but in some locations it's getting blown out. And this nor'easter is expected to track on off, continue to track on off to the east and northeast out into the Atlantic. And calmer conditions are going to come in behind it. And over the course of this week, as I mentioned before, it's going to get nice and warm. All right, so getting into the infrared satellite shot, we see the beautiful cold cloud tops of the various storms as they dance across the lower 48 and the near ocean waters of the Pacific and the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. And we can see our nor'easter up here to the northeast off of the New Jersey coastline, looks like, tracking on off to the north and east with that big old shield of heavy weather out ahead of it. We've got an area of disturbed weather sweeping in across Montana. And then we've got some moisture streaming in from the Pacific into Texas and parts of New Mexico and across Mexico as well. And then it looks like another storm is lurking off the Pacific Northwest. So Pacific Northwest likely to experience another storm over the next day or so. But again, mostly very mild and moderate conditions. We got an upper level low here, it looks like, over California, like parts of Southern California, with a little bit of rainfall in here over California and Arizona, and maybe into Utah as well. But generally just very mild, very pleasant. All right, and then looking at the National Weather Service radar, we can see some of the gale warnings are still up on the East Coast, but those should be coming down over the course of the day as that nor'easter heads on off. West Coast has gale warnings mostly on up, so like looks pretty like we probably got strong winds out there. You know what? We might take a look at the wave models, and I haven't talked about the West Coast waves. We'll get back to the West Coast waves. I've been focusing in on this nor'easter, so I'll give you guys more of a wave roundup for around the country and the North Atlantic and parts of the Pacific as we get into it. But yeah, just generally, milder conditions. I mean, we can see a few alerts of like some winter weather advisories and other moderate advisories across the U.S. There might be some increased fire hazard in some locations, so please stay abreast of fire weather information from your local authorities. And I did want to show you this marine weather statement just to show you how stormy the North Atlantic off the northeast is going to tend to be over the next week. So right now we've got a gale warning. This is in the region off the U.S. northeast coast. We've got a gale warning for this region of 69 west to the Hague line, or the Hague line. I think it's the Hague line. In any case, yeah, so strong winds, gale warnings, and heavy seas like in the range of 9 to 16 feet for today and tonight. And just large waves out there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So it is getting like for example, Thursday and Friday seas picking up. Well, Friday seas picking up from 10 to 18 feet. So interesting and stormy conditions out there. I'm curious how that might translate to the Outer Banks. I've been looking at this region of the North Atlantic a little bit more just to kind of get a better idea of how that affects the waves here in the Outer Banks. So we'll just keep an eye on that. And then looking at the NOAA quantitative prediction forecast, it doesn't look too crazy as far as precipitation goes. Looks like areas of the heaviest precipitations are expected to be out here in the Pacific Northwest. And then over in the Tennessee and Kentucky region, as well as extreme western North Carolina, parts of northern Georgia, northern Mississippi, and Alabama. But again, nothing coming up too crazy. We got some mountain precipitation hotspots as well in the Rockies, but again, nothing too crazy to note. All right, so let's get down to our local wave observations, and I've got 4 spots today. I did mention that it looks like the surf is starting to get blown out with those strong northwest winds, and that does appear to be the case. I just want to give you some indicators on swells here. So at Jeanette's Pier, the wave heights right now are in the range of 2 to 5 feet. I've got an asterisk beside that. I'm going to get into that a little bit more. Primary swell is coming in at 7 seconds from the north and east. Secondary swell coming in at 5 seconds. This primary swell is actually relatively large, but it's encountering strong northwest winds, west-northwest winds in the range of 31 miles per hour. So by the time it gets down to shore, it's going to get chopped down. And so that 2 to 5 foot range is, we might have a few 5-foot waves making it through those winds, but there's that very strong wind coming in from the northwest that's chopping down those swells as they approach the coastline. Air temperatures in the range of 47 degrees Fahrenheit, ocean water temperatures 52 degrees Fahrenheit. That might cool off with those strong northwesterly winds. And the forecast today is breezy with a high of 51 degrees. All right, heading on down south to Rodanthe. We're going to go on past the Body Island Lighthouse and Oregon Inlet. We're going to skip on past S-turns and the boiler there of the old shipwreck. And we're going to go down to Rodanthe, where waves right now are also in the range of 2 to 4 feet. Another asterisk there with those strong northwesterly winds. Rodanthe here, the northwesterly winds are very strong at gale force. I'll get into that in just a second. But the primary swell is 9 seconds, with a secondary swell coming in at 10 seconds. The winds are out of the northwest at 36 miles per hour, which is just edging into gale force. And of course, that is an offshore flow, and that is starting to blow out some of those waves. And so the wave heights offshore are relatively large, but the swell is not making it into shore, and you've got this counter swell that's a wind-blown swell that's starting to move across those waves and take away their energy. So likely the waves will continue to fall down for a bit until those waves, I'm sorry, until the winds fall down. And then once the winds start to moderate, then maybe some of that swell, some more of that swell will tend to make it back to the beaches. So we might actually get a little bit of bump up in the waves making it to the beaches later on in the day as those winds start to die down. All right, so heading on down south further, we're going to go to Buxton. Buxton tends to be the big wave spot for the Outer Banks. And right now at Buxton, the waves are in the range of 3 to 4 feet with a primary swell coming in at 9 seconds. Primary swell is actually about 6.5 feet, but I don't think much of that's reaching the coastline. So yeah, most likely waves breaking at Buxton are in the range of 3 to 4 feet. Yeah, one of those 6.5 footers might make it in. um, but yeah, and then so primary swell coming at 9 seconds, secondary swell at 10 seconds. And then with those strong northwest winds, you also have like a swell, wind-driven swell heading offshore. And that's also in the range of about 7 feet. So yeah, very large swell heading offshore. If you look out into the ocean, the horizon is probably rippling with those large waves that are driven by those near gale force winds blowing offshore. And the other swells just kind of fighting it to get in. So swells in the range, I'm sorry, breaking waves onshore in the range of 3 to 4 feet there at Buxton. Air temperature is right now 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Ocean water temperature is 66 degrees, which is nice and warm for February. Well, not unseasonably warm. It's about in the average, but for us winter surfers, 66 degrees feels a lot warmer. Okay, it is windy down there at Buxton with an expected high today of 57 degrees Fahrenheit. And for our last location, we're going to go to Billy Mitchell. I did want to give you an example of a south-facing beach. We actually have like a pretty large swell coming in here from the south toward Billy Mitchell in the range of about 6 feet. But again, that swell is encountering a strong northwest wind that is blowing offshore at 31 miles per hour. So the waves coming into Billy Mitchell more in the range of about 4.5 feet, maybe a 5-footer in there as those strong northwest winds blow that swell coming in from the south offshore. Primary swell is coming in at 10 seconds, secondary swell coming in at 9 seconds. Winds 31 miles per hour to the northwest. Temperatures Air temperature is 49 degrees, ocean water temperature also 66. Windy with an expected high also of 57 there at Billy Mitchell. All right, so that's the story for the Outer Banks today. We've got decent waves that are getting blown out in some locations and or chopped down at the very least by those strong northwesterly winds. These winds are expected to calm as the day progresses, and some of that swell might make it through as we get on later into the day. So the waves actually might improve a little bit as we go on into the day. All right, so let's get back to our weather analysis. And I did say that this coming week is expected to be rather warm. And it does appear to be the case also with the following week. And the 8 to 14 day temperature outlook for, let's make sure we got an update here. For February 20th through to the 26th, air temperatures across the U.S. Southeast, including the Outer Banks, are expected to be well above normal. And we'll have to see how far above normal they tend to be. 50s and 60s are definitely warmer than normal air temperatures for this time of year. But with this outlook, I don't know. I wonder if we'll get into the 70s, if we might see a day where we get into like a record or near record. High temperature might be upper 70s, lower 80s in some locations. So we'll just have to keep an eye on this. We'll see how this warmer than normal expected weather lines up in the day-to-day forecasts and in the days as we get into the observations. But it does look like it's going to be much warmer than normal here for the U.S. Southeast and for the Outer Banks. Out west, it's expected to be colder than normal. And we're expected to see generally above normal precipitation for most of the U.S. There is a hot spot up here in the Montana area, but nothing too broad to really worry too much about. Although with this dipole meaning big difference between hot and cold, we might want to keep on the lookout for severe weather in the dividing line in the battle zone between that hot and cold region. So far, nothing popping up too crazy, which is good. So, and speaking of thunderstorms and severe weather, um, we do have an increased potential of severe weather in the 4 to 8 day time frame here over parts of Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, into Alabama and Mississippi. So we might want to keep a weather eye to this region of the US with that the warm airs to the east, warm moist airs to the east, and the colder drier airs to the west with that convective potential starting to fire up. And this is convective potential for severe thunderstorms, meaning supercells, types of storms that produce hail, strong straight line winds, tornadoes, that kind of thing. And with the tornado alley starting to shift a little bit to the east due to human caused climate change driven by fossil fuel burning, and the fossil fuel industry primarily that just doesn't want to let us go use any other kind of energy. But yeah, with that occurring, with that shift in the tornadic zone eastward, we do want to keep an eye on this in the 4 to 8 day and the 3 to 8 day time frame, as we're expected to see a pretty strong front start to kick up. All right, so looking at the global forecast system model provided to us in vivid color by Tropical Tidbits. We do note that we got a pretty strong low out here off the US East Coast. That's the nor'easter 988, and it's tracking on off to the east. We got high pressure systems starting to move into the US Southeast. And then as we head into the day to day, the nor'easter heads on offshore, high pressure builds into the southeast. We start to get more disturbed weather over the west, particularly over the Pacific Northwest, the Rockies, and parts of Texas and New Mexico. And then we start to see our next storm start to develop as we head on into Tuesday with actually relatively strong 985 millibar low in the central US, tracking east through Texas and toward the Mississippi River Valley region by Tuesday. We get some storms firing up, but nothing too crazy as this low tracks on north toward Canada, becoming a bit of a terror for the Great Lakes region and westward. Looks like a pretty strong snow event into Canada. Rain for the Great Lakes at this time of year is warmer than normal indicator there as well. That's yeah, that's a little bit disturbing to me actually. I'm not going to get too freaked out about it, but yeah, rain over the Great Lakes at this time of year is warm. Okay, and then we've got the next storm, which I think is what the mesoscale models were looking at into Thursday. So, and this thing starts to develop into later in the day on Thursday. Looks like some severe weather starting to fire up across parts of the Ohio River Valley as a front begins to move on through. This looks like more severe weather eastward toward the US East Coast. And the frontal system moves through on Friday. Now I'm curious what the meso models were talking about because yeah, I don't know. Next Monday. Yeah, okay. So the meso models might be indicating next week into Tuesday and Wednesday because this system here starts to look pretty severe for East Texas, parts of Arkansas, and running into Tennessee. Oh yeah, yeah, that looks pretty strong. So see those thunderstorms firing up by Wednesday here in this line in the global forecast system model, and that seems to indicate a strong frontal system draped across the central US, so I'm sorry, mid-Atlantic from the east, and then draping down through Texas toward the Gulf out west. And that one does sags into the East Coast. That's interesting. So as we get on into Friday, this is of next week. February 24th, it does look like we might get a potential for a nor'easter as well. All right, so that's our analysis of weather events, and we kind of took a deeper dive into that. I'm going to get back to waves. All right, so let's look at waves over the coming week. And so right now we've got the nor'easter. It's bringing in strong northwest winds across the Outer Banks right now in the range of near gale force to gale force in some locations. This thing is going to head on off to the north and east today. I'm going to get back down to the ocean, show you the waves. And right now, we actually have some pretty tall waves in the near offshore environment in the range of 9 feet, but a lot of that's not really making it to the coastline because the winds out of the northwest are blowing them offshore, and that or chopping down the swell as it approaches. Throughout the day today, this storm is going to head on off, and we're going to get most of the waves also heading on off more toward the central Atlantic and Europe. But on the backside, we do get a bit of a swell here in the 3 to 4 foot range by tomorrow. Waves tomorrow might be pretty good. I wouldn't say amazing, but pretty good. Maybe in the 2 to 3 foot range. Definitely rideable in many locations. Maybe 2 to 4 foot, depending on how they line up. It looks like the waves are coming in at a pretty direct angle to the coastline, so it might be pretty decent. And then by Wednesday, waves do fall off a bit into the 2 to 3 foot, 2 to 4 foot range in the near offshore environment. This seems to indicate to me like a 1 to 3, maybe 1 to 4 foot across the Outer Banks day for Wednesday. And then as we get into Thursday, similar wave conditions in the 2 to 3, 2 to 4 foot range in the near to offshore environment. So again, 1 to 3 foot, maybe even 1 to 2 foot for most of the Outer Banks on Thursday. And then into Friday, we get the wind starting to turn around to the south more, and we get a stronger swell coming in from the south. And this indicates that the south-facing beaches are going to get a bit more surf. The surf for the south-facing beaches might be pretty high for Friday. And then we might get some wraparound surf as we head on up the strand of the Outer Banks with that southerly swell. So it is worth watching. Waves are expected to kick up on Thursday. It looks like 9 to 7 feet in the near offshore environment. This might translate to, I don't know, 2 to 3, maybe, let's see, 2 to 6, 2 to 7 feet in the onshore, maybe even larger for the south-facing beaches down there at Billy Mitchell and Frisco and Buxton, where you might get a strong wraparound swell there as well. All right, so thank you for joining me for this edition of the OBX Wave Report. Hopefully this won't get cut off because I have been trying to trick the various technical troubles that I've encountered. I don't know that there's it's I don't know, for some reason the Streamlabs has been cutting off the end of my streams here, so hopefully this stream end does not get cut off. So I will ask you all to please do everything you can to help transition the world more to clean energy, to speed the clean energy transition, to lend your voices and your votes and your actions as consumers to send a signal to help transition the world to clean energy, and to do all the things, to add the efficiency, to add the wind and the solar and the electric vehicles, and to do this to help defend and save our coastlines from the impacts of climate change driven by fossil fuel burning, and the impacts to the coastlines being increasingly more devastating storms and rising sea levels. And we can do this. We can tamp down the impacts of climate change. We can save the coastlines for the wonderful people who live here. And I mean, that's really the main reason why I'm doing this. I just enjoyed a wonderful birthday party with friends in beautiful coastal homes, people who live just, such wonderful, loving, helpful lives. And I don't want that to be wrecked. I mean, I don't want to see tragedy among those who have done so much and who share so much joy in our communities. And I've just loved and treasured my times here in the Outer Banks and on the coastlines. When I've lived here and when I've visited, they've been bright spots in my life. And it's as much due to the beauty of the natural world here as it is to the people that live here. So let's do a solid for them and for us, for all of us who love and enjoy the coastlines by helping to speed the clean energy transition. So thank you for joining me, and